everybody? Can you hear me? All right. Woohoo! Welcome to the 6th Annual Inclusion Collaborative State Conference. That's hard to say, isn't it? Isn't that exciting? And I'd like you to know we have at least 37 virtual sites. They were growing a lot yesterday. So let's say hi to all the virtual sites here. Woo! Hi, virtual sites. And in this very room, because we can only hold so many people, we have a couple overflows. So everyone say hi to the overflow rooms. Yay. Anyways, welcome. I'm delighted that everyone made it here and that it's October 23rd. And we are here because Inclusioneers impact. So in your bag, you'll notice everyone got their own squishy little Inclusioneer guy. And we have some fun with that on our Facebook and our Instagram. So, just be keeping your little guy around because he's going to be with us the whole 2 days. Okay? So thank you, everybody. Welcome to the Santa Clara County Office of Education. And this is not working. There we go. Inclusioneers Impact, and we are the 6th annual conference this year. We were 3 days last year, and that was almost killed our staff off, so we're at 2 days now. So just want you to know 3 days is too much, and on Fridays, everyone goes shopping. So we are down to 2 days, so hopefully you will attend every session. We've got a lot of really cool things lined up for you, so we have hopefully increased your engagement needs to stay. But I'll just leave it at that. Our bottom line is that we are here to promote equity for all. And so, as you can see, our little Inclusioneers, they zoom off, they make impact, they break all the barriers, and that's what we're here to do today. So thank you all for being a part of this. We are delighted that you're here. And we have a very special welcome from Laurie Vander, who's the Director of the Office of Special Education Programs. She is zooming in virtually. My goal is to get her here in person, but we always have to have a goal. And so she is going to share a few words with us. She's from OSEP, and she's a U.S. Director of Education. So here we go. Take it away, Laurie.
Good morning. I'm Laurie Vander, Director of the Office of Special Education Programs in the U.S. Department of Education. The Office of Special Education Programs, or OSEP, is dedicated to improving results for infants, toddlers, children, and youth with disabilities, ages birth through 21, by supporting states and local programs to provide comprehensive Part C and Part B services under the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. OSEP also administers Part D of IDEA, which funds national activities under technical assistance, personnel development, technology, and parent training to improve outcomes for children with disabilities and their families. Though I'm not able to be with you today, I wanted to let you know how excited I am about the Inclusion Collaborative meeting and that you are taking this time to focus your professional development on inclusion. The theme of your meeting is Inclusioneers Impact, which I think is terrific, as each and every one of you can have such an impact on children's outcomes by ensuring that they have access to and meaningfully participate in high-quality, inclusive settings. To support you in this important and challenging work, I wanted to highlight some resources developed by OSEP-funded centers that are aligned to the impact theme of the meeting. In the early childhood space, the Early Childhood Technical Assistance Center, ECTA, has a national initiative to develop inclusion indicators that address inclusive policies and practices at the state, local, and program level. The indicators will support administrators and personnel in examining and implementing strategies that strengthen their capacity to provide high-quality, inclusive programs. ECTA is developing tools, such as videos, to show examples of how to implement the indicators. For school-aged, OSEP funds the TIES Center, which is a center on inclusive practices and policies. Its purpose is to create sustainable changes in schools and districts so that students with significant cognitive disabilities can fully engage in the same instructional and non-instructional activities as their general education peers, while being instructed in a way that meets individual learning needs. They have several briefs and tips on evidence-based practices to support inclusion on their website. OSEP funds 2 centers on implementing multi-tiered systems of support to enhance children's social, emotional, and behavioral outcomes. The National Center on Pyramid Model Innovations focuses on early childhood systems, whereas the Positive Behavior Intervention and Support Center focuses on school-age systems. Both centers have worked to embed trauma-informed care approaches within their frameworks, as these frameworks provide a natural organization to install trauma-informed practices into programs and schools. The framework also provides a structure and process for education and mental health systems to interact in a more effective and efficient way. Please check out their websites for several practice-based resources. The other resource I wanted to remind you of is the Parent Training and Information Center in your region, Parents Helping Parents. For inclusion to work well, we need to develop collaborative partnerships, and it's particularly important to have collaborative partnerships with parents. Parents Helping Parents has a number of resources for families to support them in being collaborative partners within inclusion. Within your practice, remember that OSEP is a collaborative partner with you. You can always find more information on the centers we fund at our Ideas That Work website. I wish you a wonderful conference. Enjoy this opportunity to hone your inclusionary powers.
So our goal is 2020 OSEP in the house, right? Can you all send some messages for me? Okay, good. I just also wanted to acknowledge Parents Helping Parents. They are a resource that is so valued within our region. They not only serve Santa Clara, but also a large part of our Northern California, and the family resource partners, wherever you live, you need to make sure that you connect and coordinate with them because they really are that connection to the families. So I was really delighted when she said PHP, Parents Helping Parents, because now I can take this to the next meeting and they can be so proud of themselves. But anyways, so we wanted to remind you that October is Emergency Preparedness Month. And so we have to be safe and healthy at all times. And so our superintendent has made it a big priority of our office to have emergency preparedness be a big part of what we do. So every gathering, we talk about it. And hopefully we won't need to do anything, if you know what I mean. And please don't burn popcorn in the microwave because that gets the fire engines here. So if we do have an emergency evacuation, please notify the staff that you require assistance exiting. We will go through these doors here. There's other doors where we have ways, and we have volunteers within each session who will guide you. We will actually evacuate the building, so bring your purse, because I've been trapped inside and outside with my purse not with me. And we're going to be going to our big parking lot, and we have an evacuation zone, and we'll be taking roll call, which will be really fun, but we can do it. And then we will not let you leave until we say all is clear. And we would like to know, is anyone CPR certified in this building? Look around. Okay, those are your friends in case we need you. We always like to identify in a group who may be available. Thank you. And AEDs. Where are the AEDs on this floor? Oh, you're not I know AEDs stand for something else. But we have 6 in the building, so be sure if you need one to let us know. Okay? Anything I missed? I know. We also have a nursing mother's room, which is this way. If you need assistance, please let me know, and we will be happy to take care of that. And then we wanted to make sure you know a little bit about what the Santa Clara County Office of Education does besides host inclusion conferences once a year. We actually support 31 school districts, business, technical assistance, and a lot of instructional support. And we have a lot of direct services. So we have special ed, direct service. Any special ed folks in the house? Woo! You provide our direct service. We have alternative education department, that would be AED. And we have Head Start, early learning. We've got a lot of direct services that we do. We also help support county board authorized charter schools. So we are providing more things than you usually know in this one little building. Anyways, thank you. The next thing I'd like to do is to acknowledge that we have an amazing County Board of Education, and their pictures are here. It only jumps up and down if there's someone walking upstairs, so don't worry. I know people are looking at that. And so I would like to acknowledge them. They've been extremely supportive in our inclusion efforts over the years. And then it is my great pleasure to introduce our next welcome speaker, our County Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Dewan. And she has made inclusion possible. So without her, and I'm not kidding, we would not be where we are within this county. I have a whole bunch of things I'm supposed to say about you first. She is a champion of high quality, equitable, and inclusive education, and an advocate for change in policy and practice that ensure that all children have access to high quality, equitable education. She's been in education for a long time. She has lots of her own personal reasons for pushing inclusion forward, and she's definitely very supportive in our equity movement, improving educational outcomes for all students, and our key priorities for her have been early learning and our data-driven decision-making, education reform, change leadership, and her commitment to serve the underserved and vulnerable youth in our community. This year, Dr. Dewan received the Grail Family Services Siempre Award, that's fun to say, for outstanding contributions to the community, and Grail Family Services is a very strong advocacy group in this county for parent support. She has also been featured on the cover of the Bay Area Women's Magazine, and if you go into our Educational Resource Center, you can see it, and has an article highlighting her career, and she mentions the Inclusion Collaborative, so that was really special for me to read that. And she was named the 2019 After School Champion by the After School Collaborative, so she is a very busy woman who is out supporting and taking care of most of our community here. And she received a commendation from the Board of Supervisors for exemplary work on behalf of children and youth of Santa Clara County. And in 2017, she was honored by ACSA Region 8 Leadership Award for visionary leadership. So I personally am honored to work under her. Her vision and what she has done to really support inclusive practices to promote equity for all kids has been just amazing to watch and see the changes that have really impacted our day-to-day work here in the County Office of Ed. So I'm going to go ahead and let her talk now. Thank you, Marianne.
Good morning, everyone. It really is a pleasure to be here. This is one of the most favorite days of the year for me. I absolutely look forward to the Inclusion Collaborative Annual State Conference, to see a room packed with people who care about children and who care about inclusion. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the 6th annual, and I love saying that as well. The 6th annual, I was here for the first one, and we didn't know at the time if we would be able to sustain such a heroic effort, but here we are 6 years later. At our office, we are committed to serving, inspiring, and promoting student and public school success in our 31 school districts in Santa Clara County and beyond. And our work is really foundational in its focus on equity, diversity, inclusion, and partnership. And we're very intentional about including the word inclusion in our core principles. Obviously, it matters a lot in our conversations about how we serve students with disabilities, but inclusion is really about all of us. It's about students with disabilities, our LGBTQ community, our English language learners, and more and more and more. And if we want to have classrooms and school districts and communities where we can all thrive, we must insist on a focus on inclusion. We do believe heavily in investing our limited funding for the most impact. Most of you in this room are educators. You're probably working in school districts that are struggling financially. We are seeing declining enrollment throughout the state. We know that impacts our revenues. Costs are rising. All of those things are true. And for county offices of education, we've been flat funded under the local control funding formula since 2014. So we have a choice. We can look at that and say, we don't have enough money to do X, Y, or Z, but we choose not to do that at the County Office of Education. We choose to say, what can we do with this limited funding? Where are we going to invest it, and what is our focus? And so we know if we leverage our partnerships and our community, we can make the most of those dollars, and we can tell significant stories of impact. An important way that we also accomplish this is by providing learning opportunities that respect the diversity and affirm the uniqueness of all of our students. As an educator, I know that developing relationships with others who support inclusive practices is a first step in developing equitable classrooms. We can't do this work alone. We need partners and champions and others who help think about the work in similar ways. When I think about impact, I look back on my career and I can think of numerous times when we advocated for inclusive practices for young persons, and it transformed that child's life, their family, and the community of learners in which they were served. I think of one student that I had who had a learning disability. He stuttered, and he had ADHD. He was a very complicated young person to try to educate, and yet we wrapped our heart around him and provided all kinds of support to the place where he went from a special day class setting into a fully included classroom for 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th and 8th grade. And eventually, he did graduate from high school with a high school diploma. I think also of the deaf and hard of hearing students in our community who rely on ASL. And they're being served so effectively in comprehensive high schools with the support of interpreters. And not only are they benefiting and moving on to high school graduation, community college, and other programs, but their peers who embrace ASL and are learning a second language and really broadening the community for our young people. And I also think about a young lady who I served when I was assistant superintendent in a school district. She was a vibrant high school sophomore, overnight attacked by a horrible virus that made her paralyzed. So she was at a high school football game on a Friday. Monday morning, she was paralyzed from the neck down. We had choices. There was a lot of effort to obviously take care of her significant health needs, but she was loved in that school community, and we did everything we could to provide her a quality educational program that allowed her to stay on her high school campus. She graduated from that high school, and she went to college in the same town. I know inclusion works. Those are just 3 stories that come to mind about the powerful impact that inclusion can have. The next 2 days will give you an opportunity to learn firsthand how the presenters and your peers are also successfully including students with special needs in our general education classrooms. You know, one of the things that we talk a lot about here is that we have to get away from talking about education in silos. We don't have early education and special education and English language learner education and K-12 and general ed. We just have education. So let's think about our education system in a way that is a one-system approach to supporting all of us. You're going to hear about the research and the evidence-based practices that turn learning spaces into places where all children succeed together. I am so proud of our Inclusion Collaborative team who present this conference and thousands of other professional learning opportunities that prepare educators to serve all students. The Inclusion Collaborative serves as the state's lead agency for the California Equity, Performance, and Improvement Program, a 2-year grant program designed to promote equity for underserved students. The Inclusion Collaborative has partnered with numerous national, state, and local organizations to develop the California One Equity Coalition. Strong Start initiative here in our office, First Five California, San Jose State University, the Warman-Hoven Institute, and local legislative offices are just some of the groups that have joined us in this important equity work. One key partner is CAST, the national leader in the development and implementation of universal design for learning. UDL is a research-based set of principles to guide the design of learning environments that are accessible and effective for all. I want to congratulate Kathy Wahl for her partnership, her visionary leadership, her incredible work ethic. I think she and I are, like always, the first ones here and the last ones to leave. She works every weekend, incredible work ethic because she's passionate about this important work. I also want to congratulate Sung Park for his incredible contributions to the Inclusion Collaborative and the rest of the Inclusion Collaborative team for all the work they do to develop this network that supports inclusive learning. And I think they deserve an incredible round of applause. Thank you. So it really is important to remember that inclusion is about all children. When we are together, we learn more. We learn also not just more academically, but we learn more and develop stronger social and emotional learning skills. We learn to respect differences, to develop a better understanding of our diversity. At our office, we care deeply about all students and ensuring a positive future for all of them. What we do for the least among us is the hallmark of who we are as people, as agencies, as schools and communities. I know this is a vision you share. That's why you're here today. And I thank you for joining us for these 2 days of learning, for conversation and reflection, and to get re-energized and motivated around this important work. Together, we can give all of our students the tools necessary to thrive in school and in life. Thank you so much for being here, and please enjoy the conference.
Thank you for your kind words. Can you see why we're doing so great? Isn't it wonderful to have the support from above? If you would like to connect with Santa Clara County Office of Ed, we have several ways to do that, so I thought I'd list them for you, but they're on our website. But more importantly, we are the Inclusion Collaborative. Isn't it exciting? And one of our big premises that we follow is that everybody should feel welcome and that they feel like they belong. So we're all about welcoming and belonging, and I want to make sure you look at your neighbor and tell them welcome. Let's go. Come on. Virtual people, you need to tell your people welcome, because we're all here together to learn and support and re-energize. Okay. So see, wasn't that fun? So welcoming and belonging are a key part of it, and we want to make sure we model that for our conference. And these are what the Inclusion Collaborative believes in, is that every individual, regardless of abilities and disabilities, has the right to equitable access to inclusive learning and community in community environments. And we have our elevator speech. All of our staff wearing this shirt can say that for you in their sleep. This is our staff. Woo! This was last year and they came back. Oh my gosh. We have quite a few different things that we've done this year, so I appreciate our staff. They have worked probably 60-hour at least week this week, and last week and the week before, and the week before. And we just really want to, I really want to acknowledge all their hard work and their dedication, and their why is because they want inclusion to work. So if you see someone wearing this shirt, be sure to tell them thank you, okay? I also want to acknowledge Mrs. Charmaine Warman-Hoven. She is a funder, an advisor, and a very good friend of the Inclusion Collaborative, and myself personally. She has provided us funding for the last 14 years for over a lot of money, okay? So when you see Charmaine Warman-Hoven, Charmaine, are you here? She might not have snuck in yet, but give her a hug and tell her thank you. And then I wanted to also announce that we are officially turning 15. Oh, we're just mere adolescents. So we're going to have a networking event here tonight. We will have the Dream Achievers playing. They're an awesome band from families with children with special needs. We're going to have some special guests from Angels on stage to greet us and take care of us. And we're doing a Superfest film festival of disability films. So that'll be here afterwards. You might as well just stay and get some food, right? This is how we keep you here. Have you noticed that? Conference goals. We really want to make sure that people develop relationships. There are lots of wonderful, amazing things going on across the state, and you never quite know about it because you're so busy on your hamster wheel doing your job every day. But for example, we have people from the San Jose Library who have a huge inclusive project, and they're going to be sharing what they did. Go to their session and find out what they did, or it could be virtually saved. But it's a good way to connect. We have a team from Los Angeles High School here who are going to share. There they are. They drove up, last night? Maybe this morning. Oh, flew. Whew. But they're going to share what they've done. So there's all kinds of wonderful, amazing pockets of really bright spots of inclusion going on throughout our state that we want to connect you with. So that's part of it. We want to meet and learn with peers and look at how we can support inclusive programs. And then looking at the research. We've got quite a few research-based folks here today with some real evidence-based practices that you can learn about. We've got our embedded instruction folks from University of Florida here. We've got folks from CAST, who are going to be presenting a lot of their research on universal design for learning. We've got Dr. Rich Villa in the house, and I mean, he's instrumental because we use his checklist all the time. But at any rate, so that's what we're here to do. We always like to have our expectations. So if you have a cell phone, put it on silent. And I think everything else is fairly understandable. So we'll keep moving. We have everything on Sketch. Has everyone figured that out? If you don't have your link and you don't know what to do, go see the lovely Myra. Please be sure to tell Myra how great she is. And she will help you, or you can email us and we can help you, virtual folks. You can build your agenda. There's a social directory. You can just be on schedule all day. In-person sessions. We have tried to limit the number of people that show up in spaces, so we have you pre-register so we could kind of determine room size, but then things get exciting and all of a sudden we have 58 million people wanting to be in one room, and we can't do that. So there will be a limit on chairs in rooms because there's a fire marshal, and when the room is full, we will have to close it. So if it's a room you really want to be part of, even if you signed up, we cannot guarantee you a seat, okay? So hustle, that's what I'm saying. First come, first serve, sit down. We will be, however, virtually recording a majority of the sessions, and they will be posted on our YouTube website. So if there's one that you just can't get into and it's virtual, that's okay. You can look at it over Thanksgiving break. Okay. You can get CEUs from the University of Pacific. It's on our schedule in the resources. You must attend both days. We don't give any refunds. We send it off to the University of Pacific and they take care of it. We also have program development hours. Some people need program development hours. That's available also in your schedule. We do distribute it at the end of each day, so don't print your hours and then go shopping. That was supposed to be funny. Okay. We have online evaluations. So we have a Sketch mobile app that will ask you after the session, to rate the smiley faces. And then at the end of each day, we're going to send out a survey link to your email connected to your Sketch. Please, please give us feedback. Every year we reiterate and redo and refine and make it easier and better. We need to hear from you and get your input, okay? Raffle. This is one of our sneaky ways to get you to stay. So in the house we have the Discovery Source representative. Where's Dave Scahill? There he is. Woo! On your tables you will notice we have 35 calming kits. Those will be raffled off. So do you notice how we had to zip tie the thing so that no one would get into it? Because we've lost materials. So everyone has a raffle ticket in your bag, and we already have those so that you have that chance to win. But if you go to a networking event if you go to our makerspace, which is across the courtyard, and if you make a person first terminology pledge, you will get an extra ticket. Whoa, I know. So we will be posting winners at lunchtime tomorrow, and your ticket number will be posted. Okay, I know there's going to be some questions, but it does keep you here, and maybe you can go to the networking event. These are our sponsors. We really want to thank First Five for sponsoring and the California One. First Five is going to have their the otter here at our networking event, so that's more picture opportunities for you. Strong Start provided our breakfast, so please thank them. Where are they? Strong Start in the house. They provided our breakfast today. Brooks Publishing helped sponsor two amazing speakers, Nicole Edericks and Irene Schwartz from Brooks. And then we've also got Psych Services who provided support for us. So we thank all of our sponsors dearly. Are you ready? We're about to go make some equity. Okay, let's go. So it is my great honor to have our keynote actually introduced by another guy, Dr. Gary Waddell. He is going to introduce our keynote speaker, Glen Singleton, but I wanted him to come up here because he is now my direct supervisor. Yay! And he is our assistant superintendent. He is the director of Equity and Educational Progress Division. I know, it's hard to keep up with. Gary, has anyone ever met Gary Waddell before? He's everywhere. He's all over the state. Come on up, Gary. Gary has over 30 years of doing all kinds of amazing work. He started out as a principal, a teacher, a principal. Yeah, he's got a Counselor of the Year award. And most notable, besides the fact that he really believes in equity and makes it happen and supports us in the Inclusion Collaborative, he has really made significant impact here in Santa Clara County and what we're doing in our division. So take it away, Gary.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. It is an honor to be here and to welcome you as well. You know, I was in our Equity and Educational Progress Division. It is a real treat and an honor to have the Inclusion Collaborative be part of that division because it is work that is so central to ensuring that every child in our county has access, opportunity, and a bright and positive future. I was remembering when I was talking to Kathy yesterday, many years ago, probably 20-some years ago, I was a therapeutic foster parent for adolescents with special needs. And I fought every day to ensure that they were included in classrooms where they could contribute and they could learn. And that was a fight some days because there was a feeling back then to put them in a school somewhere far away. And so I believe firmly in this work, so thank you. It is an honor to be here this morning and introduce a very exciting keynote speaker. You know, as we come together over the next couple of days to dig deep into inclusion and to understand the important role that inclusion plays in equity, and it's a core component. There's no more important work than we can do than the work of equity, which is about rethinking and remaking our systems, renewing our commitment to historically underserved students, and understanding that this work is about saving children's lives, and there's nothing more important. It's the civil rights work of our time, and I think when we get this right, then we've gotten everything right. It's our highest calling. There's no one who's spoken with more eloquence, passion, and courage than this morning's keynote speaker, who will be joining us through the magic of technology. Before I share some of Glen Singleton's notable accomplishments, of which there are many, I'd like to tell you a personal story about the impact of his work. I've known and worked with Glen since the early 2000s. Really, when we were focused on this work of closing achievement gaps, which turns out was really about the opportunities that we provided our children and our collective work to build our capacity to meet all of our children and move them forward. I was a principal some years ago in Fremont Unified and had a strong equity team that worked with some of Glen's colleagues. I was then invited to be part of a group called SABOS, which was Creating Equitable Bay Area Schools. That was work that really has been foundational for my understanding of the critical nature and importance of equity and building a network of Bay Area equity leaders. Glen and his team's leadership, vision, unflinching clarity around racial equity and advocacy have changed our collective understanding about the deep and pervasive impact of systemic racism and white privilege. His work has impacted countless thousands of young people and those with the privilege to serve them. Glen has been a courageous leader in this work for many years. He is a truth teller who asks the right questions, confronts historic systemic racism, and is a voice sorely needed in our local, state, and national discourse. So just to name a few of his accomplishments, of which there are many, so I'm just skimming the surface. Glen is really a Bay Area treasure and a leader of racial equity in a time when we need to have those conversations every day. He's devoted over 30 years to constructing racial equity worldwide and developing leaders to do the same. He's an author, thought leader, and strategist. He is the creator of Courageous Conversations, a protocol and framework for sustained, deepened dialogue and beyond diversity, a curriculum that has taught hundreds of thousands of people how to use it and how to really engage as individuals, as professionals, and members of broader communities in this work. Glen is the president and founder of Pacific Education Group, an agency that guides leadership development in education, government, business, law enforcement, and community organizing. He is the author of Courageous Conversations About Race, a field guide for achieving equity in schools, which has really become a seminal text in this work. Glen is a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania and Stanford and resides in San Francisco, although today he's residing in Mexico. So he is joining us through the magic of technology. It is a great honor to welcome Glen Singleton.
Everyone, good morning. So first, let me just extend my respects and recognition to the original custodians of the land that you're sitting on, the Ohlone people. And without them, obviously, we would not be able to gather. I also want to thank Superintendent Dewan and Gary Waddell, who, as you've heard, we've been connected for quite a long time. Gary, I think it was when you arrived in California from North Carolina. That was back in the late 90s, the early 2000s. And then my new best friend, Kathy, who has been stewardly and making sure that this is all situated this morning. So thank you all and thank everyone. And I think you're in the San Jose room. Is that where you are? Is everyone there? Yeah, that's a real special place for me. I'm going to talk about that a little bit as I just spend a few minutes with you this morning, kind of connecting with the theme, the sixth time to gather around this idea of inclusivity, and to bring some of the key learnings that I've had over the past 30 years, really, much of it which has taken place right there in that room that you're gathered in. So the first thing I want to say is that I've discovered, mainly from our work in the South Pacific, in New Zealand and Australia, New Zealand specifically, where we're working at the federal level with the Ministry of Education on these very issues, and substitute the challenges of inclusivity for, say, students with special needs, students of color, English language learning students, to all of those categories mainly experienced by Māori children, which are the Indigenous children of Aotearoa or New Zealand. And in this space, it has been quite clear that what is missing in formal education is some of the Indigenous knowledge and wisdom. In my own tradition, we call that ancestral wisdom. And so how is it that we come to understand the proper way to greet, to support, to educate children in community traditions that make sense to them? And so when we talk about inclusion, it's important that we begin first by creating a space of inclusivity for ourselves to do this important work. Sometimes we're drawn together and the achievement disparities, the challenges of education really force us into a kind of professional development that can be very good, but we haven't tended to the personal spirit first. And therefore, this idea of understanding who it is that's sitting next to you and how is it that you will partner to develop deeper understandings about the work that you're trying to do. And so there are three aspects that I want you to pay attention to. The first is called place. The second is called name. And the third is called intention. Okay, and so in the indigenous sense here, and drawing on the Maori tradition specifically, these three understandings must be in place before we have adequate trust to do the deep and engaging work that you're called to do over the next couple of days. And so place is really your source. It's your connection to how you get here. It's your understanding of how you connect not only to your line of ancestry, but the land on which you sit, stand, and require for your sustenance. And so each of us here in the room and around in the virtual spaces that are joining us, we all have a place. And if we are disconnected from that place, then we have specific challenges that go along with it. And so while my place has been the Bay Area for the last 30 years, my place more specifically is Baltimore, Maryland, because that's where I grew up. That's where my family is. That's where my roots are. And even deeper than that, Baltimore is derived from the place of the American South, where both sides of my family emerged from racial stress and trauma. My grandfather's brother was lynched, and this was the call, the clarion call for my family to relocate to a more safe and supportive, if you will, inclusive space. And so this conversation about place for a person who is considered called African American in the United States does not begin in the American South. Obviously, our place prior to 1619 begins in West Africa. And so to understand traditions of education in West Africa is to understand in some way how to educate successfully African American children in the United States. And so as we start to look at students who are on the margins, families who are on the margins, it's important to understand where that trail comes from and what are those indigenous insights that might help us in understanding this. The United States is particularly challenged in this way because we don't do a very good job in indigenous education, in understanding how the indigenous experience in the United States, in fact, shaped how we arrive at this place today. And so the lack of that understanding, and even when we begin to talk about the complex issues of race in the United States, oftentimes those conversations begin with looking at the experience of African American people. And while this is important, significant, while this in fact has in many ways shaped the civil rights movements around the world, the first people to experience marginalization, lack of inclusivity, genocide, trauma were our indigenous people. They were the first here, and they were the first to meet those who were coming onto the land and coming with various ideas of what to do with the land, the people, et cetera. And so understanding this indigenous experience is quite important. And therefore, each of us understanding our own indigenous experience is equally important. The name aspect is the next piece, which I urge you to come to some understanding of, not only in the work that you're doing over the next couple of days, but when you return back to your institutions and organize for professional learning. When you meet with a variety of people outside of your organizations to get at real significant and difficult work, name is critical. When we offer our names, too often in schools, those names are changed. Those names become initialized. Those names are told to children that they're too hard to pronounce. And so children right away become detached from their name as a part of understanding their place, in fact. And so we must do a much better job of giving children back their names and inviting children to come with their full names. They cannot be their full selves without their full names. And when schools create a culture in which they feel embarrassment by that pronunciation, embarrassment by the lineage of that name, we have disconnected them from a source that allows them to actually achieve at the highest levels. My mom was a single Black woman in Baltimore. She was in her second year of college at Morgan State College when she became pregnant with me. And in that experience, my grandfather was most intentional about having her return back to school and to be the first college graduate in our family. Unfortunately, my grandfather lost out in terms of his description. Fortunately for me and for, I hope for the people that I get to touch in my life, my mom and my grandmother colluded against my grandfather in the 12th hour and decided to not have me adopted, but to have me come home. My mom was very shaken and moved by this experience, so much so that she didn't, recognize that she couldn't remove me from the hospital without a name. And so just in the moment of time when the nurse said, you can take your baby, but you have to have a name, my mom decided to name me after the astronaut, John Glenn. Her father's name is John, and so she wasn't really excited by him at the moment. So I didn't get John. I got Glenn. And Glenn is a really fascinating name to give to a Black boy in West Baltimore. There were no other Glens in my experience. I would say until maybe the last few years, where around the world somewhere I'll meet this, guy of African ancestry who's also named Glenn. We then have to go through the added trauma of my name is spelled with two N's, not one. And so to reinforce this, this idea. But, my mom's notion in her head was she had a baby that she too wanted to metaphorically go to the moon. And so it was that idea of that name that comes forward. And every time I hear it, no matter how much, teasing I might get about the origin and the lack of Black Glens in the United States and around the world, this name has a special meaning for me. And so I think each person in the room has a search to understand, what is the origin of that name? And even if the name is something quite casual, even if the name is something quite simplistic, maybe doesn't have any meaning to you, recognize that for many people in the room, there are real significant stories connected to name. In fact, names of people who have done extraordinary things in your family and your lineage that the hope is that you will carry on. And so that idea of name also travels with our children. And it's often that very tender moment of when parents really make sense of who this child is to be in the world. The final piece then is your intention. And some people think of intention in the more macro sense of purpose. Purpose is one intention, but there's an even more specific intention that has brought you into this room this morning, the intention of what it is that you hope to accomplish over the next couple of days, the intention more substantially in terms of your family, your friends, your community. What is it that you bring specifically, and what are your hopes? What is it that will cause for success in your mind? And if as teachers, we don't understand what our intention is, it's going to be very hard for students to understand what our intention is in the room. And so this idea of making sure that part of your intention at least is about fostering inclusion, okay, a sense of belonging, changing the culture so that people feel like this is my place, okay? This is where I am safe in my being. And so my intention since meeting Gary much longer even before I could articulate it, I believe, my intention was about being a source that elevates racial consciousness in our communities, in our society, and now I have the fortune of around the world. And so I always travel with that intention. I am one as a source to make sure that those around me do not suffer from what has been accepted in the United States as a low level of consciousness about issues of race. A disconsciousness sometimes, which means not really getting it right in terms of how it works out and what it is. And just permission to sit on the sidelines and ignore this critical and important piece. I have a dual intention, though, because I've recognized that bringing about elevated racial consciousness can cause trauma. And so I think that side by side with elevating our consciousness also needs to be a reality of promoting healing among us. Okay, and so if those two things aren't coming together, then people often end up with a vast amount of information which saddens us, which immobilizes us, which discourages us, which causes us grief, pain, which causes us embarrassment, shame, guilt, all of those words that typically are familiar and connected with this concept of race. And so I think it's been as critical to raise consciousness as it has been to promote this kind of racial healing. And so those three ideas are my place, my name, and my intention. And so as you're sitting there right now, you all know me better, whether it was the bio that Gary read interspersed with his own, what we call personal, local, immediate. Always better to engage from that space. You are expert in your experience. And therefore, don't get hypothetical, don't get theoretical. Initially, get personal. That's a learning, okay? And so let me just talk a little bit about the room that you're in, because I do find that room to be quite significant. And as I look out, I would imagine that there's a screen that has been pulled down in the front somewhere, and I'm probably on that screen, which is fascinating because that's always been the screen where my lesson is. Okay, and so that room was introduced to me. Thank you for that. Oh, this is going to be fascinating. Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. Hello. So yeah, the podium, all of that. So that room, and I, I just resaw Last Black Man in San Francisco, and sometimes we kind of confuse the origin of structures. And so I would love to tell you that I was one of the first teachers in that room. Because it just didn't have any of those fancy accoutrements that you see right now. The fact that we can beam all over the place from that room. I remember using an overhead projector in that room. Okay, so for those of you who can connect with me a little bit, I thought that my color slides were just the best thing ever, and I would spend all night in Kinko's at the time. There's one around the corner, getting them all together for the Beyond Diversity training. And Beyond Diversity is a 2-day training that I wrote in 1995. And so to talk to longevity, and particularly one of the challenges of education is that we tend to change up our direction way too fast. And we don't give ourselves time for actual change to set in and to occur. We're in a fast-paced society where we want to see it go really quickly. And so I learned that we got to stick with things for a bit in order to really see impact, particularly when we're trying to address issues that are centuries old. Okay, and that's what we're talking about here. I gave the date 1619. I can go back even before that date, obviously, with the Indigenous people. So we're talking about the 16th, 17th century, when these issues of racial inequity start to occur. And side by side, racial inequity is gender inequity, because you're looking at pictures of men only, okay? And the roles are quite described. And so this way of deciding who's better than whom is the conversation and the structures that we're trying to change right now. That's what inclusion means. And so when I sit in that room over 20 years ago, with Beyond Diversity, 1995, going through the state in this organization called the California School Leadership Academy. And this was the branch for all leadership development in the state of California. It was an exceptional platform, an exceptional programming. It led the world in administration development. And so we might ask what happened to it. And I heard the conversations about budgets and things like that before. Budgets to me are a sort of mystified way of talking about priority. Okay, because what it is that we feel to be important, we're going to find resources to actually take care of. And so I don't necessarily see it as much as a budget issue, but this seminar, for some reason, continues to be resourced today, not only in the United States, but 5 other countries around the world. Okay, so while we're sitting here today, Beyond Diversity in its form that started right there in the room that you're sitting in, that training of about 100 people for 2 days continues today through my team of 27, but also through about 200 affiliates that we've trained over the course of this time around school districts around this country and various parts of the world. These folks are delivering this very basic training on racial equity. I remember in 1999, I was called to speak at a Silomar, and that was the first conference on standards for the state of California. I changed my topic to be talking about equity and how equity was the appropriate time to learn how to speak about standards, okay? And so California is a place that has been situated in this equity conversation for quite a long time. Before my work, there was big conversation about diversity. And so you need to know that those 3 words travel together. The first word, equity, which is really looking at structures and policies and practices. The second word, diversity, which is looking at people, okay, and the composition of people. And then the third word, inclusion, which is about culture and is specifically about establishing cultures of belonging. I learned those things right there in the room where you are, okay? Because that Beyond Diversity training about race was really a conversation that came from the place of diversity only. We were having a conversation about the increasing diversity of the children in the state of California, the unmatched diversity of the adults that were serving the children, particularly the teachers. We were looking at achievement gaps, which later became opportunity gaps, equity gaps. And so these 3 words, I think, are so important that they travel together. You can't have inclusion without equity. You can't have equity, okay, and inclusion, or even need a conversation about it unless you are negotiating diversity. And so those 3 aspects work together to create our most sound experience. And so the question that I would have you leave with is, which educators, parents, students, and community members express a feeling of lacking inclusion? Okay, who is really speaking about not belonging, right? And what you will notice is the student voice tends to be representative of the adult voice. And so if in fact educators are not feeling included in your systems, there is no way that the students are going to feel included. And to the degree that the educators reflect the diversity of your student population, then it does not become a second nature thing to figure out how to meet the needs of the children, because the adults already know from their own experiences. So we don't diversify school districts just for the sake of diversifying. We diversify school districts because the diversity brings perspective and experience that matches the diversity, perspective, and experiences of the children and the community. And when you have those people there, okay, then there is a call for equity, because those systems that we're talking about, the American education system, was never designed to educate all children. And so the challenge is to create a system that now meets the needs of all children. The best way to do that is to have that system meet the needs of a diversified education force. And when we are inclusive, we actually not only have diverse teachers and diverse administrators and diverse counselors, but we're actually creating an environment where we can hear their voices and act on their concerns. There's no use in having diversity that we don't listen to. And systems that struggle the most with children of color, with children who have special needs, with English language learning children, are environments where the educators themselves don't have those experiences. So everything must be created as professional learning. We will always need professional learning because the diversity will become more and more interesting, fascinating, expansive. Okay? Anyone who is against diversity, my former professor, Carlos Cortez, said that, you know, you're fighting a losing battle because diversity just is. We will be diverse, and we will become increasingly diverse. And so those who are fighting diversity are actually fighting on a losing side. Diversity is going to win. And so we need to diversify intentionally and create environments where we can hear the voices of the diversity and act on what their concerns are. So I learned this in Beyond Diversity, along with the realization of 3 factors. One is that race matters. Okay, and that is that you don't go into a circumstance believing that at some point you need to get at race. It's the reality that race is always present. And so what in our system is supporting us to address how race shows up in the way that we function in terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion? Okay. The next thing is that the first aspect of leadership, anti-racist leadership, is through conversation. And so if we don't have conversation, okay, if we don't have conversation, then we can't satisfy our most complex issues. Conversation is in fact, is the most ancient human art. And our whole system in the United States is devised around we being able to have effective conversation. And so when that breaks down, particularly among people who don't share perspective and experience, then our children suffer. And so when the 2 parts of government don't speak, when the 2 parties of government don't speak, when the 3 parts of government don't speak, when we don't deliberate in the legal systems, when we don't debate and have conversations, we never get to our highest level of understanding. And so that second piece, race matters, and the first act of our leadership, our anti-racist leadership, is to have effective conversations about race, which we call courageous conversation. The third thing is that this is a systemic challenge. And so while it is important for us to recognize the aspects of racial injustice that we might see each day in our school environments, it's also critical that we recognize that taking action on single acts is what I call random acts of equity. Okay, and random acts of equity do not add up to systemic change. We have to look at these issues systemically. And systemically means that every part of the school system has areas to address, to foster equity, to promote diversity, and to enhance inclusion. And so those 3 ideas emerge from Beyond Diversity. I'm going to take you now, that was starting 25 years ago. I'm going to bring you a little bit closer, all the way up to 2012. In 2012, I would teach in that room on Monday nights for San Jose State University. So as an adjunct professor in the urban high school leadership program, my role was to bring these ideas and principles of equity to aspiring school leaders. And so I taught 8 years in that room. And as the program got smaller, we actually moved to a little room around the corner. It was kind of distressing, but for a professor, it was great because I had fewer papers to grade. All right, but the reality is, over those 8 years, teachers came from all over the Silicon Valley, essentially, to be a part of this unique self-contained program. And we had up to 100 students sitting like you on a Monday night. They were doing their teaching and getting their master's and their administrative credential. And essentially, in this program, what I discovered was, first and foremost, I never met a student, a teacher, who was not capable of actually improving their own instruction and then becoming an administrator for equity. That it just didn't exist. And so when I watched teachers actually given the support, given the encouragement, given the community to develop as equity leaders, these teachers prevailed. It was just last week at our national conference in New Orleans that a teacher came up to me who's now an assistant superintendent over in Marin County. And she said, "Do you remember me?" And this is my least favorite aspect of my whole experience. When people come up and say, "Do you remember me?" Because of course the answer is no. But by the way that they say it, it should be yes, because you had an impact on a person that was in a crowd of people. And you never really got to make this connection. And teachers love this when students come back, a decade later or 2 decades later and just say, "You changed my life." Right. But it was fascinating that this teacher, now administrator, was in New Orleans at the conference and leading this work. And she was in one of the original cohorts right there in that classroom that you're sitting in right now. And her story is fascinating because she never believed that she would be that person. In fact, she could now talk to me about how much resistance she brought to my classroom. It was just, and I know that most of the students come in resistant initially, but ultimately we have to build community and be able to do that. And so I say that to say that all of our teachers can learn. And I came into California and we had a mantra, all children can learn, or all kids can learn. And I said, we really shouldn't be saying that. That's obvious for an educator. Of course, all kids can learn. The question is, can all educators develop? And I had to answer that question, yes, in order to be sitting here with you today. I believe in this. Okay. And so when I think about that room and I think about, what it is that's possible, that's what I think about in terms of our educators. And after 8 years of teaching in there, I'm certain that maybe even some of you are a part of that San Jose Urban High School Leadership Program, San Jose State, but it's a big part of the experience for me there. The last thing I'm going to leave you with, which is not even what I had planned to talk about, but I carved out these last 5 minutes because something happened here. And I believe that it's important to talk about it. This just happened 2 days ago. And as Gary said, I'm in Mexico. I'm in Mexico because the week after our national summit, which is about 1,100 people in some space somewhere around the country, and we get together for 5 days, and I have a very tiny staff. We're small and mighty, but we're exhausted after this 5-day thing that we put on for 1,100 people with keynotes and 100 concurrent sessions and everything, right? And so I take vacation after that week. And when Kathy asked me to do this, I was so enthusiastic. I was like, of course, I'll be down there. I'd love to be there, get back to my roots and be in the room with you all and all of that. And I didn't realize it was my vacation. So we're in the middle of trying to understand something. And this is actually an example of what I'm going to ask you all to do a better job than I've done over the past 30 years. Okay. And so this last thing is called self-care. And with this, I'm going to acknowledge that the work that I'm asking you to do, congratulating because you're doing this work around equity and very specifically how it is that students of color show up disproportionately in all of those groups that the superintendent listed before, whether they be special education, English language learners, children on the margins disproportionately are Black, Brown, and Indigenous children. And so we have to deal with race to deal with these issues of inclusivity. And dealing with race in the United States is arguably the hardest work that you will ever do. We are a country that is unwilling to acknowledge its racial past. We are a country that is unwilling to confront the racial trauma that exists right now in our society. And we are a country that lacks the capability at this point to deal with the escalating racial dilemma and challenges that are occurring right now. And as a result of that, those of us who choose to do this work must also choose to take better care of ourselves. So this should be vacation, and I should not be here with you on Zoom. And I want to own that, okay? And Kathy and Gary are so convincing. And it's relationships that bring. So if it weren't them, I wouldn't be here. So I'm taking a little bit of pass, but I'm still here, okay? The other piece of it, though, is 2 days ago, while here in Mexico on vacation, it's been raining and just horrible. And I fell and broke my arm. Right. So for the next 6 weeks, I am immobilized. I'm going to immobilize now. I didn't want pity or questions or anything. It's very interesting becoming this person with this. But what I did was I called to my assistant and I said, put me on leave for 6 weeks. And this was the hardest thing I've ever done because since beginning work as a paperboy in Baltimore at 11 years old, I've never stopped working. And sometimes the work doesn't allow us to heal. And I've experienced this. So back to the ancestral piece where I started, I began to do my research on what does it mean to break a bone and to specifically to break your hand. And so, of course, you know, the orthopedic here just tells you about different fractures. And by the way, people, if someone tells you you've fractured a bone versus broken a bone, don't get happy. It's the same thing. Okay? And I just learned this after fracturing my ankle twice when I was in high school playing basketball. So they said fracture and I thought it was great. But I learned in Mexico that a fracture and a break are the same thing, okay? The other thing is that you will have, you know, painkillers and all kinds of things that are Western. But in a non-Western, what is known as Kemet, one of the earliest societies that had 3 principles: know thyself, distinguish knowledge from foolishness, and build for an eternity. These are the 3 goals. And unbeknownst to me, these are also the 3 definitions that underlie courageous conversation. I didn't know that. That's ancestral wisdom. Now I know that. It's fascinating. It's exciting. So I'm paying attention to this Kemet wisdom, if you will, this earliest civilization, this 3,000 years ago, how people thought and how people took care of themselves. And I think it's important because that also gets us to this name, place, intention idea. But the whole thing with this break means that I'm out of alignment. Okay, and out of alignment, breaking your hand means that where your spirit is, your totality, your sense of being, where that exists, and where my mind is, are 2 different places. Okay, and that allows for the lack of safety, the lack of precision in how I go about living my life. And so while there is a problem here with a wet pavement and, you know, signs should have been up and I'm sure other people have fallen and me and the hotel have to deal with that right now, the reality still is that this has happened to me. And this has caused me, it's also my hand that I write with, okay? So I can't write. The car that I left at SFO is a 6-speed. I can't get it home. Okay, and so it's causing me to rethink how I go about living my purpose. And the key is that over these 6 weeks, when I can't do my work, I'm going to have to figure out how to be. Okay, and really how to take care of myself so that something worse than this doesn't occur. And so I'm asking you as the last thing that I tell you to really take care of yourselves. This is the most important work that you will ever do. And the results of this work are the most gratifying that you will ever experience. We are doing exactly what the system was designed not to do. Your gathering represents that. Your program represents that. The leadership that has organized this for you represents that. So all I can say to you is pay attention. Hold those 3 things together: equity, diversity, inclusion. Bring forth that indigenous wisdom, okay? Let's use everything we know to solve for this challenge before us. And most of all, take good care of yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Glen Singleton. He told me something had happened, but I didn't have the full details yesterday. And I'm glad I didn't. So, Glen, we have a few questions and comments. I'm sure someone in the audience may have something to ask. If you have questions, we can take them one at a time. We also have people virtually who can send in some chat questions. We have cards on our table. We have a few more minutes before people get ready to go take a break. But if you have a card or a comment that you'd like to share and ask Glen in front of everybody, we will be up here and wait for that. But meanwhile, since I have the mic, I wanted to just thank you, Glen, for your words. They touched me. Self-care. I think I need to take a weekend off. And I wanted to also mention that we have a program within our Santa Clara County Office of Ed called My Name, My Identity. And I think that speaks to exactly what you're saying, that we really need to respect children's names and adults' names and not rename ourselves. So My Name, My Identity is on I know it's on our California One website. And you can see Tawan. She's with our multilingual department. She will take care of you, but it's also on our website, Santa Clara County Office of Education. I also would like to look around at your table. Do you feel like you guys all belong? Do you feel like you are welcome? Do you feel like, I'm talking to you virtually, because we are creating a space that you will learn together while building relationships, and it's that welcoming and belonging aspect that Glen shared that is so critical, because when you do feel like you're welcomed and when you do feel like you belong, you're able to engage and learn and move forward as a person. So I'm not getting any questions. That's good. Okay. We are on, did you notice he did not have his strap on, and I wondered when he was going to put it on, so that was great. Thank you, Glen. I also want to thank Jennifer Del Bono for pushing me to get you in, because she was one of your
That's my student,
urban
Jennifer.
leadership program staff. She works for us in the Santa Clara County Office of Education. So any other comments, questions? All right, we have decided, Glen, as the County Office of Education, that you get 5 minutes off to get started on your vacation early.
Very